Welcome back to the Brisbane Lions fan cast. To have our eyes cast over round 3 against the Dogs, it is me, JB, joined again by Patrick, who made his way to Marvel Stadium to endure what I'm calling the most frustrating game of football I've seen in a very, very long time. How was it from Marvel Stadium, Patrick?
Let's just say I managed to kind of ruin my weekend twice by watching the game and then watching the replay in anticipation of this event this morning, or this podcast. So yeah, it was a tough watch twice, is all I'll say.
I can imagine. It's one of those weeks where I'm not looking forward to sort of catching up on AFL 360, The Couch, Footy Classified, First Crack, all those sort of media programs that I largely enjoy 99% of the time, but after a performance like that, I don't go out of my way as much as I normally do to see what people are thinking.
Yeah, well, I think I did say after round 1 that, and you tended to think that it was more they were actually being kind of kind and focusing on an underperformance by the team, but I guess it's kind of wondering how long underperforming is going to become the pattern, or where the team are at. So where to begin with this one? Marvel's still an utterly bizarre venue to watch football. It feels like you're going to the theatre, particularly if you sit up high the way that I do. If anyone wants to know the kind of person that I am, I'll sit third tier and I will sit opposite the broadcast side, just so that I get both perspectives of the game.
Sure.
So that's my father coming out of me. So there you go. Leading into the game, there was a lot of the stuff with Dunkley and whatnot, and they needed a performance. We needed a performance, but no one seemed to give that any kind of thought at all when we didn't perform. So yeah, hot start, JB. What do you reckon?
That first quarter, the ball was just pinging back and forth, and whether the turf at Marvel Stadium has anything to play into that, but I guess the pleasing thing, and there weren't too many, the pleasing thing about that was our effort and intensity seemed to be there as opposed to round 1. What we were lacking was the polish and the class and our ball skills and decision making is where we got let down, and Fags did touch on that in the press conference. So it was good to see the effort this week, but yeah, just the ball use was where we let ourselves down. That and ill-discipline.
Yeah, ill-discipline was a big one for me, because I had us giving away 5 free kicks, whether they were there or not, in the forward 50 to deny goal-scoring opportunities. So I think there was a holding the ball where Ashcroft didn't give. There was in the back by Zorko that I thought was sort of barely there. And a couple of other ones that were just sort of pack infringements that I think with the fourth umpire, like, it's hard to see, and particularly when they're in the context of not showing any kind of replays around that sort of thing, particularly at the game, it can create a bit of a weird situation where you're sitting there going, well, what's happened there? Why has that happened? And you really get nothing. So, yeah, the decision-making, I'll admit, watching it live, it didn't seem like it was quite as high-pressured as it was on the broadcast, but it seemed like our decision-making was very much not the easy option. It seemed like there was always a better decision to be made. So it was a frustrating first quarter.
Frustrating in the fact that we did give away a couple of goals, especially that ridiculous second goal for the Dogs where I think Payne went that 10-metre kick to Coleman, he got done, and then they just slotted through a goal. I think Lobb got it in the end. But
so that was the beginning of the second quarter. I think their second goal was the first one was Jamara
then
onto
was it
a
Oscar
random
Baker?
Turnover. Yeah, the second one was the shake and bake Baker.
Yeah.
Which to my mind, keeping notes on the replay when they'd kicked 7 goals, that was the only one that was kind of unaccounted for in terms of whether it was an error on our behalf, a free kick, or a free kick not given. And I'm not normally one to talk about the umpiring, but they seem to get quite a lot of kind of kind decisions inside forward 50, whether they were one way or the other. But I still think that we should have been ahead by 3 or 4 goals in the first quarter. And at that point, it's a different game entirely, because the frustration on a lot of the Bulldogs fans, it was obviously quite tangible, whereas it seems like they've got, more of a reason, I say in inverted commas, to be frustrated. But I think the Lions fans are much more frustrated and have much more reason to be frustrated. So I think the element of the first quarter was that it set a standard that slowly diminished over the course of the game, and in isolation was okay, but not enough. really.
Well, yeah, in stark contrast, there was, sort of free-flowing ball pinging back and forth in the first quarter. By the time the last quarter rolled around, it was a stalemate deadlock for the best part of 15 minutes. I remember looking at the clock, I think there's 15, 16 minutes left. We're at 8 points. I'm like, all right, well, there's still plenty of footy to be played. We can claw this back and steal a win here. That same scoreline was still there with 4 minutes on the clock. Nothing's happened. The pressure is still there back and forth, but it has dried up a little bit from both sides. In contrast to our ill discipline in the back half and giving away goals, our forward half, so many squandered opportunities. Obviously, those two first set shots from Danaher that you put any other AFL player in front of that goal, 30 metres out, slight angle, they're probably going to hit that goal 6-7 times out of 10. And just replace that with generic AFL player X. They're kicking that goal, but it is part of the Joe show. He went the drop punt, missed. Second time around, he goes, well, I'm going to go around the corner this time. Missed again. I think Charlie took a while to warm himself into that game. He squandered a few opportunities as well early on. It just seemed like our forward line is just like a bunch of downhill skis at the moment. When things are going good, they're all happy to get their lick of the ice cream and chip in with a goal here and there and celebrate big time. But when the going gets tough, like they're all playing for free kicks, they're all going, well, that's it. This is up to me to kick this goal and not playing team first footy. And it wasn't just the forward line. Like a lot of players were guilty of that on Thursday night. But I think just the forward line sticking out to me a lot. Like last week, it was Joe having a go at Eric Hipwood for not centering the ball. This week, Joe's doing the same thing, and we all know that he burnt Charlie Cameron in that last quarter when the game was on the line.
Yeah, there was some difficult times where I think between what you would say the three goal kicking forwards being Danaher, Hipwood, and Cameron, where they seem to just be not on song with one another, and there was a lot of times where options were burned going inside 50.
Thank goodness for Jack Gunston, who had his kicking shoes on and played a fine game. Like that's the game that we brought Jack Gunston in for. Kick a couple of goals, present as a marking target, and just be...
He showed a bit of grunt in the forward 50 as well, because I think his third goal was from a tackle inside 50. Just touching back on Joe, interestingly enough, he went for the drop punt, he went around the corner, and then he went the pass off, which was the one that was almost most likely to be him just putting his foot through it from 55 at a tight angle, where I think live at the game I said, well, he'll slot this one for sure, and then he passed it off not well. So it's frustrating because I haven't seen a level of frustration from particularly Eric Hipwood, who I thought worked extremely hard throughout the game.
You're very alone in that set of thoughts there as well, because he has been under the gun from fans and media alike since Thursday night.
Yeah, and I understand why, I in terms of output, but watching the broadcast yesterday afternoon, I can see much more why. But at the game, he runs so much and he picks up so much slack for Danaher, because Danaher just seems sort of not to wish to. He'll either lead to the wing, but he won't come back. Whereas Hipwood is horseshoeing around the 50 the whole time. So it's almost like at the point where he finally gets to a contest and he's so knackered from his running that the lack of impact is there, which is a problem in itself. But I think he's footing the bill a lot for Danaher's kind of laziness at the moment. And I actually, funnily enough, heard a Dogs fan near me sort of say, he catches everything, doesn't he, to Hipwood? And I was kind of like, what are you on about? But, here we are. That's the perception. And I heard, similar Dogs fans absolutely calling for Aaron Norton to be dropped to the VFL team after, some of the things that he did in that game. So I as much as you feel like, there are big problems within the Lions, I think a lot of clubs, unless they're winning every week, tend to sort of have similar issues with similar players where, there might be a lack of effort. But I suppose in that instance, I just think it's hard. It is hard.
I think this is where our forward line is missing like a particular player, and we will get to the things that Luke Hodge said later on in the show with role players and things of that ilk. But we just haven't got that contested mark option, and that was McStay to a degree. He'd at least affect the contest. I mean, whether it's their build type and the way they play the game, but Danaher and Hipwood are they'll mark a ball out on the lead, but in the contest, yeah, they might pluck one every now and then, but they're more likely to throw their bodies forward at the slightest bit of contact looking for a free. In contrast, the Dogs, Aaron Norton's similar build and athletic type, but will affect the contest more often than not, and he will go hell for leather and try and mark any ball, whether it is going to knock him out or not. And we just...
But that, yeah, to me though, that's. I remember in a time where we had, Josh Shackey playing full forward and Hipwood playing as a centre half forward, and it was almost chalk and cheese where Shackey was not willing to put himself on the line, and Hipwood was willing to just scud missile himself at everything to try and bring the ball to contest. And it was also almost a lesson in footballing selflessness and toughness from Hipwood to Shackey to show what we needed in another marking forward. And now he's kind of regressed into that sort of mold. I don't know whether that's to do with the knee Rico or...
I think it's a combination of the knee Rico probably like haunting him a little bit. And we've had McStay. McStay has been that player that has affected the contest. And it was a bit of a salt in the wound, the game the following night, watching Collingwood and Richmond. You look at the numbers and McStay didn't have a great game. And he really did at the Lions as well. But just watching him fly for the ball, affect the contest, maybe get a ground ball, dish it off to someone in a better position. We just haven't got that player at the moment. And that player, and this could almost fall into obscure players of the last 20 years, but that player could have, should have, would have been Michael Close. I don't know if you remember Michael Close. Big, strong boy. He was touted as the next Jonathan Brown or whatever like that. But we just haven't got that solid build of a key forward that's going to absorb body contact and affect a contest anymore.
Michael Close, eh? Bring back Josh Walker. There you go.
Sure.
No, it's an interesting one because, given the fallout of the criticism on Danaher, I actually found myself on Footy Wire Stats looking at Fev's season at the Lions and wondering, was it really that bad compared to Joe's output? And
I think, I
think we'd probably take someone with 3 goals a game in them, to be honest.
100%. The Fev experiment was, I think no one ever doubted his abilities on the field. Like, the man could kick goals. It was the off-field, the culture problems, just the unwanted attention and the money we pissed away getting him into the club that ruined us for the next 4 or 5 years. That and the go-home 5 that really set us back.
True. But with Danaher, he's on a premium salary at the club. And, is it at the point now where we sort of look at it and go like, yeah, we keep saying the footballing ability is there, but is it there? The inconsistency, there seems to be far fewer showings of the talent being there than there are. He's frustrating, and it's understandable for players to be frustrating to a degree, but frustrating this frequently?
I think that's just Joe. I don't think that's ever going to change, unfortunately. That is what we signed up for, and I do recall when we got him through free agency or trade, however it transpired in the... I think it was free agency because they got the pick 7 as a compo. The comments flying from Essendon fans were all a very similar vein. Enjoy your 1 goal 5 every week, Brisbane, or enjoy your 0 goals 7. Stuff like that. So I don't think it's ever not been in his game. It is a package deal. You are signing up for, in quotes, the Joe show. So you're going to get a game every now and then where he's going to kick 5 and do stupid shit like kick a goal over his head or a goal that no one else kicks. But then you're going to get a game like Thursday where he's pissing away shots 30 metres out straight in front, burning teammates because he's going for glory. It's all part of the package, and I think... Like, I've accepted that. Yes, I agree. 100% frustrating to have a player with so much potential that plays footy that way. But he's made it very clear that footy's not his life. He doesn't live in the city. He doesn't own a TV. He's good at it, so he'll do it. And he enjoys it to an extent, but it's not all that he lives his life by.
Yeah, it just makes you kind of wonder because I kind of assumed at the time that those Essendon fans were kind of more so just salty about him playing a collective 15 games over 5 years,
and very
more so than
as well, yeah.
than any kind of pattern. Because statistically, the last year he played, more than 10 games at the Bombers. He's kicked how many goals? 65 goals. I don't know. Frustrating, obviously. I mean, that was even brought up to Fagan in the press conference. You know, do you find him as frustrating as we do? And it's at the point now you can't rely on that to lead a flag charge.
No, and that was the headline that came out of the game on Friday morning from Kane Corns is Brisbane can't win a premiership with Hipwood and Danaher. Like they're not two you can rely on, and it's hard to disagree with that after performances like Thursday night. And there was a very brief period of time. I think Tom Rockcliffe floated the rumor we were looking into Darcy Fogarty as a key forward option before it was very clear that McStay was leaving. That we'd obviously put the nets out, and we did place a call to Darcy Fogarty. And I think that's the sort of forward that would be really handy right now. Big body, young.
Well, I just remember Darcy Fogarty coming in, I think, and in his second game getting suspended and thinking, this guy is terrifying.
Yeah.
He was virtually a Tex Walker 2.0. He hit the ground running and then had a couple of lean years. And I know he was a bit maligned last year, but he responded really well to a lot of criticism. You know, I'd love to see a player like that because he's a forward line brute.
Even someone like a Cam Zerha, it's the same again. Big body will affect the contest. We haven't got that, and you know all the people in various social media forums that are like Hipwood needs to be dropped, Danaher needs to be dropped. We're at a position now where we're sort of stuck with him. I mean, apart from the fact that we've offered Hipwood a 6-7 year deal or whatever it is, but we haven't got anyone rolling around in the twos that is going to make that much of a difference. We got Fullerton, Henry Smith, and Kalen Lane are tools down there.
Well, one thing for me is there a necessity to have 3 marking targets, or is that just kind of something where we've almost led the competition in that trend when we started with the 3 talls, particularly pushing one ruck forward? But we're now in a position where we're having Hipwood, Danaher, Gunston, and then a ruck pushing forward. Do you need four marking targets? Just to go back, a player that I am astounded, although they are a backman, Griffin Logue for Fremantle was one that I thought, man, you'd love to have him in the team because he played forward he swung in the game against us last year and he was really effective. And his willingness to get to the contest. And I think that was about the time when McStay was looking at not signing on. So
well, that's it. We obviously
to go to North Melbourne.
Yeah, we put the feelers out for him as well. So we obviously did. We obviously were looking for that type of player, and we landed on Gunston. And at the end, maybe he was the only one willing to make the move to Brisbane. And I mean, you can't force someone to come here, I suppose. But I mean, can't complain. Gunston had a great game on Thursday night.
Yeah, well, he for sure. I have written he kept us in the game. I've got 2 sets of notes. I got the one from when I was sitting at the game. So if anyone saw a weird guy with a notepad, that was probably me.
Not writing your manifesto up in the 3rd tier.
Yeah, writing in opposite. What did I say? Opposite broadcast side, sitting writing in a book. Our smalls were crumbing behind the pack, and to my mind, I did not understand that at all because to me that's wet weather footy. The famous line from Lethal in the O2 Grand Final was tell Acker to get to the front of the pack when the game was drying out. Consistently, we just had 2 smalls behind the marking pack, and the Bulldogs were crumbing front and square, getting the ball every time.
That's what I mean by that downhill skiers comment. So if that drifts out the back and someone like a Bailey, McCarthy, Charlie run onto it, slime themselves a little goal, then the motorbike comes out, everyone's laughing and cheering, but it didn't happen. So here we are going, well, who's willing to play that team footy?
Yeah, it's team first footy. You'd love to see it in Brisbane colours.
Haven't kicked a goal from their last 13 entries. The Brisbane Lions need one. And Jack Gunston celebrates an important goal.
Just one thing I want to touch on in the last week and for the extended amount of time. The media are entirely enraptured with the bounce of the ball and saying, do we need it? Do we get rid of it? I would like to bring into concern throw-ins because they are consistently like 15 meters short in every game you see. And you'll have ruckman set up and then have to bolt towards the boundary line and the ball will hit another player and then they'll get done for interfering in the ruck contest. And he's just it's throwing the ball, throw the ball. And if you can't throw it, the amount of, if you're inconsistent, step in. It drives me absolutely mad.
Well, that brings into, as much as the bounce is sort of under question, that the last touch rule deliberate free kicks are getting paid more and more as well, or insufficient attempt or whatever you want to call it. So maybe we're heading towards throwing it up in the middle and just last touch rule on the sidelines. I don't think I'd particularly hate any of that. I do like the bounce to a degree as a traditionalist, and I think it adds an element of uncertainty to it and randomness. But I don't want to.
I think a big thing is just the amount of, let's say, better umpires you would be missing who can't bounce the ball with the level of conviction. And even then, the ones that apparently can bounce it with level of conviction is sort of wild. You know, there was, I think, multiple times in the game where the ball bounces and they both run in, and then it sort of bounces in the circle, but on the other side. And I think Ford got done for a couple of blocks, and it's sort of like he's running into, to tap, and then the ball goes around him. He has to turn on, basically do a 3-point turn because he's gigantic. What do you expect the players to do to just get out of the way? But not much you can really do about that.
The other side of the ground, so we've talked about the forwards. Let's move down to the back six. Harris Andrews, I mean, as much as Jack Gunston kept us in the game in the front half, I think Harris Andrews played one of the all-time great games of his career. 16 marks, really held that back line together when Darragh Joyce had a poor game. I mean, he gave away a lot of free kicks. He probably needed to be moved off Jamara Ugle-Hagan sooner than what he did. But then as soon as he got moved to lob, they kicked the ball to lob, and lob got a goal off a free kick as well, or a dodgy mark. So it was one of Darragh Joyce's poorer games. I like to think he can bounce back from that because I've been championing him since the start of the season to have a taller body in there. But a poor performance from him, but a great performance from Harris.
Yeah, but Harris's performance kind of begs the question is, at this point in his career, you don't want him to be breaking his marking record. We shouldn't be having that many inside 50s coming in. I mean, I think I remember maybe sort of Lepper saying, defending's great when you're in a premiership team because the ball comes in under heaps of pressure and very few times. And you'd possibly argue that the pressure was there from the mids to enable him to take a lot of those intercept marks. I thought Payne was really good. I thought Darragh Joyce was a bit unfortunate at times, but, he seemed a little bit out of his depth with the height that was on display. But yeah, a fantastic game from Harris, and unbelievable. But it's the sort of that shouldn't be happening in any sort of circumstance at this point in the club's trajectory towards trying to win a premiership. He shouldn't be having that game ever.
Counterpoint to a degree. He's also had more experienced defenders around him as well to share the load in Gardner and Marcus Adams over the last couple of years. So maybe that plays into it, and maybe that we've just got two other younger, inexperienced key backmen down there with him that are still learning the ropes to a degree. But I agree with you 100%.
I think one thing that's worth making mention of is just for the amount of intercept marks that we had in our defensive 50, the turnovers number was the same, which just kind of goes to show how much we were actually turning the ball over. It just in a less ornamental way, let's say.
Payne down the corridor, not 15. Kadeen Coleman, hand passed in a panic, allows Lob to score. That hurts.
Three players I want to ask you questions about and just sort of like at the same time put on watch from the first three rounds that I believe are not performing the way that we know they can. So they are underperforming for the first three games. It's still a small sample size, but at the same time, 3 bad games in a row is unusual for these three that I'm going to talk about, and that is Zach Bailey, Hugh McCluggage, and Link McCarthy. Do you disagree with any of those? I think Hugh McCluggage especially has stood out as not being the player we know he can be.
He seems to almost have lost half a yard of pace.
Which is sad because he was never the quickest bloke on the field.
No, he was always, his body movement and his drop of the shoulder was one thing that was just like, chef's kiss element to it. You know that I'm as big a fan of Hugh McCluggage as anyone on earth.
Oh, as am I.
I think maybe it's just, he hasn't had a stable position. He hasn't played outside, he hasn't played inside. It's hard to judge. The thing, I guess, with him is that at least he still has a willingness to get the ball and try and give it to other people. Whereas, to mine with Bailey's making bad decisions, providing that they're not a shot on goal. If he's shooting at goal, it's a good decision. Not, then sort of just torps the ball forward or gets caught holding the ball. And Link McCarthy, I think, I thought Link McCarthy was anonymous at the ground, but on rewatch, he seemed to be much more kind of in there for the selfless things.
Well, he is probably one of those players that Hodgie is speaking about as a role player who does, as you say, go, unannounced, anonymous to a degree, but he does bob up and do the team first things. That sort of stuff has been lacking for me for the first 3 games this year.
Yeah, he definitely hasn't had the output that he can have. But I think with someone like him, you're not looking at him to be kicking multiple goals necessarily all of the time. It's a matter of he can, and it's sort of ignore him at your own peril if that's the case. I don't know. For me, I still have Link and McCluggage in the team the next week.
I wouldn't say, especially McCluggage, you don't drop him, and you don't drop Zach Bailey. Like they've got enough credits in the bank, and you know that they can turn it on and perform. When we get to our 22 later, it sounds like we've both dropped someone, and we will get to that. I thought Josh Dunkley was up for the fight. He didn't have his best game, and Fagan touched on that, but I thought it was a really solid game, and he was up for the contest.
Yeah, I think he was really good, and he copped. The Bulldogs fans were largely silent. They were booing Dunkley whenever he had the ball. That was the only time they said anything. And the other time they were vocal was when Bontempelli kicked a long-running point, and then when they won. But it felt like a Lions home game. Albeit it was quiet, but if anyone looks, the Bulldogs cheer squad was basically a smattering of about 6 people versus the completely packed, I want to say 7 sections of Lions fans behind the goals. And make no mistake on the broadcast, but a lot of the booing and the jeers were coming from them, ironic cheers, that sort of thing. So it was more than 50% would have been Lions fans at that game.
One thing I did like from Chris Fagan that I have not seen too often throughout his career. He's usually like, this is the plan and we're going to stick to it. These are the players, we're going to stick to them. I thought his in-game coaching was a little better, and maybe that's got to do with him being back up in the box, having a wider view of the ground and what's going on. But once the sub was made, once he sort of got a feel for the game, it was fast, free-flowing. He took off Fort. He brought on Noz, who I thought had an impact straight away. And he shuffled the magnets around. Rayner went forward, Wilmot moved up to the wing, and then Answorth went back, and those two sort of swapped between wing and half back. So he did show a willingness to sort of change things up a little bit to try and break the deadlock and get a result our way, which I kind of liked. Because as I said, apart from that Richmond final last year when McInerney went down in the first 3 minutes and we had to have a makeshift forward/ruck line and made our game unpredictable, we ended up getting the win. I think he's been reluctant to sort of change too much in game.
I think that was probably one of the safety nets of having Rayner playing across the half back line, is the ability to sort of, in case of emergency, break glass, for an impact player to come forward. And he did kick a goal. I loved seeing Answorth out there on the field. He's one of my unsung kind of favourites of the team.
Yeah. I think a lot of fans feel the same way about Noah. His decision making, his disposal is questionable, but his intent can never be questioned. And that was on full display when he was running back with the flight of the ball against Alex Keith, who has got 15, 20 kilos and a foot on him, and he came out the victor in that one-on-one. And until that moment, didn't see too much of that sort of selfless footy from anyone else.
Yeah, well, I think I've got in my notes just written Answorth, and then under that I said example of team first footy, which is something that didn't get seen. Just in the last quarter when Hipwood got the free kick from the Harris Andrews 50, that kick was on for about 20 seconds before it happened. A little bit of intent, although Harris had a great game. Him sprinting up, playing the early ball. Those sorts of things happened time and time again, of players taking a mark and not looking behind them when they take a mark at an open forward line, 4-on-2s. I still think when Hipwood kicks that goal and we're within 2 points, we should be winning that game.
Big time.
There were so many opportunities that we had to win that game. And I even think that we probably should have, despite the poor performance.
That just added another level of frustration to another already frustrating game. We seem to spend so long clawing back to getting within, spitting distance of a victory, but the Bulldogs just kept us at arm's length every time. We'd spend 15, 20 minutes trying to claw back a goal, only for us to give away another one via ill discipline, piss away an opportunity up forward, and then we were all our own worst enemies.
Well, how many goals did they kick in the end, and how many were from their three key forwards? You know, it's one thing going back to the first quarter and a half to go, well, we're matching them here, but we're giving their key forwards a run, you know, like giving Jamara a couple of early goals, given the heat that he'd been under and the things that had happened to him. But I think he was 1 goal 5 coming into the game. You know, we gave Lob a goal. Norton
we gave Lob 2.
2, there you go.
And he still...
Lob 2 goals.
He got subbed off.
We tried to give Norton 3, but he kicked 2 out on the full. It's just... There's one thing in games like this, you can't let, you know, big confidence key forwards. Imagine if another team gave Danaher and Hipwood 3 free hits, they probably missed 5 of them, but, you know, like, it just changes the complexion of the game and it makes them up and about. And what can you do? It's a hard thing to watch and it's a hard thing to try and actually analyze because there's so much just sort of... It's like a lack of identity in terms of the way the team are playing. Is the game plan? There isn't really a game plan.
Well, that's it. It's obvious that we needed to shift the game plan to incorporate more team defense. Is this the result of, you know, a shifting game plan, teething problems in a unit getting used to the way we move the ball and the way we set up defensively? And is that why we're having inconsistent performances? Or are we just simply not a team to be trusted and not a premiership team? Is it that simple? Well,
I would argue that, you know, where is the team defence? Because it's not coming from the forward line. It's sometimes coming from the midfield. The defence can't be faulted. I can't fault the defence at all.
No, the back six they're doing their job.
But yeah, I mean, there's only so many, you know, to my mind, if there aren't that volume of inside 50s coming in deep, Barry Joyce isn't giving away most of those free kicks. And I think it's almost as if, you know, coming back to the kind of not team footy or, you know, role players or whatever, but it almost seems as if because the back line are so willing and able to play team first footy that the other lines tend to sort of think, well, maybe we don't have to.
McCarthy flew. Here's a chance. Cameron, one way then the other, finishes it off. The Lions have got a couple.
Let's get into it. The Luke Hodge saying the role players and Joey Montagna sort of doubling down on that, saying we've got too much talent on the list that no one's actually willing to put the team first. Everyone's like, I'll get the ball, I'll do it, without going, well, how can I actually make the team better? So, those are two commentators that have sort of put the word out there, and it's hard to disagree with them at the moment because we do have a lot of stars on paper. And then when you look at our team coming up against this Collingwood team next Thursday night, or this Thursday night, you look at the teams on paper and you go, yep, that bloke wins his one-on-one, that bloke wins his one-on-one, that bloke, on paper we're better in every single position bar maybe a couple. They've got so many role players like your Murphys, your McCrearys, blokes that will never take the limelight. But you look at the way Collingwood are playing their footy, they're winning every game. They're, top of the ladder, basically, aside from St Kilda. They're beating good teams and doing it well and easily and playing great footy.
It elevates the player and the team. You talked about McCreary. He's someone that I've had my eye on for more than since the beginning of last season, just because I think I saw him run and win a 1-on-2 and then get the ball and then just keep running and you sort of this guy's so reliable.
Yeah.
Across the board, Collingwood are so reliable. You know what you're going to get, and it allows your Dacos or your Pendlebury or Sidebottom to be able to affect the game in a way. The fact that Pendlebury and Sidebottom are still affecting games the way that they are, albeit slightly less, but they're slow.
Yeah.
They're slow. They're not quick, but they're always in the right positions because they can rely on the people around them. There seemed to be just a bit of confusion with us because you're looking there going, okay, there was a point where rather than trying to match the Bulldogs in the contest because we were getting dusted, we've tried to, just smash the ball forward and go with it. But there's a lack of continuity because half the players don't seem to be following that and half the players don't. So you're not committing players back and forward. It just seems like, is there a bit of tactical nous being lost? Are the players missing something? Is there not as much directive as needs to be? I think if we're not playing our absolute best, we're in trouble on Thursday.
It's a strange one because, obviously the Gabba plays a big factor in it. If this was at the MCG, game over, don't even worry about it. We're not winning this game. I think the Gabba obviously plays a big part into it. This time last week, I said to you, I've got a strange feeling about this game against the Dogs. I don't know what it is, but it's not sitting right. the opposite this week. I'm not confident, but I've got a better feeling about it, and maybe that's just because the inconsistency, the Jekyll and Hyde style of footy we're playing at the moment. But if we end up 2-2 from our first 4 games, we'll end up beating the 2 teams that we probably shouldn't have and losing to the 2 teams that we probably should have beaten almost comfortably. And look at Port's performances since round 1. They've been garbage.
And I don't think that the Western Bulldogs are back at all. And they've got to play the Tigers at the MCG this week. And I don't think they're going to look particularly sharp. So, I mean, could be wrong. But do you think that the team are they're flitting with the idea of becoming sort of home track or flat track bullies? I know traditionally a flat track bully doesn't turn up in the big games, and we did beat Melbourne, but whenever the going seems to get tough, whether it's interstate or travel, we got the job done a couple of times at Marvel last year, but
yeah, and we've won away games down at Giants Stadium, Adelaide Oval, Perth, not so much. That's more of a 50-50 over the last couple of years. The MCG has obviously been horrible for us. Those away games at Ballarat and Launceston have been probably more on the losing side. So, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, probably.
Because it's weird, you don't get a great sample size of seeing the team play living in Victoria. And for the amount of turnout that you get, and I don't know if there are any Victorian fans that actually listen to this, but hats off, because I think they said we'd won 5 straight at Marvel, but I went back and looked at which of those games were. That goes back all the way to, I think, 2019, which is wild. But 4 of those 5 games were really poor performances that just sort of scraped a win. You're talking the Zach Bailey Collingwood game, the Essendon game from last year, which was pretty awful. St Kilda game from last year, which was awful until Rayner decided he just was going to go and win the game. Then you've got last night, which was a poor performance. I think the only exception to that was the Carlton bloodbath with Neil and Mitch Robbo covered in blood.
Yeah,
which was a better performance. But then you throw in the Melbourne game and the Richmond game from last year at the MCG. It's like, I'm always going to go to the footy when I can, but far out it's difficult sometimes because you don't seem to get an intense performance.
The one away venue that we actually seem to play all right at, really, but still not walking away with the win is GMHBA. We do play well against Geelong there for some reason. We don't come away with the win, but the last couple of times we've played them, and you can go back quite a while, there's been a few, pantsings, but the last couple of times we've only just fallen short, and arguably by some umpiring decisions that have cost us the game.
Nefarious means, but those ones are, they're hard to get tickets to anyway because the ground's about the size of a molehill. But yeah, I don't know, it's frustrating, but it is really nice to see the volume of Victorian Lions that do make it to the games. It's astounding. The volume of the crowd is significantly louder than the home fans or the home fans,
yep,
whomever they are. So hats off. But I just wish the team would, they've got to know that. They've got to be able to see that. And it's just these people are looking for the team to represent them and represent, they're old footy fans and they're not seeing good footy acts or good footy performances. It's frustrating. It's a bit disheartening. And I think, there's, despite the level of frustration that people feel, there's just sort of disappointment.
And a lot of the time has come down to, and this is the first time in a few years where they've actually been to 6 games in Victoria, in Melbourne as well, in fact. But there's always been promises or we're put in for another 6 games, and we'll end up with 4 and then 1 down in Tasmania and 1 in Geelong. That sort of half counts. Whereas this is the first season in a while we've had 6, so I know a lot of Victorian fans are super keen for that, and I would have been if I was still living down in Melbourne. I would have been over the moon at that sort of result. But if they're going to keep putting performances like that, then it's sort of I've only got 6 times to see this, and each time is it going to be like this? Because you know what? I'll take the 4 instead.
Well, the 4 has been like that.
Yeah.
So it's a hard one, I think even if you scrape a win in that game, you're still feeling a little bit dirty about how you got there.
Yeah, for sure.
You still wish you did. You still wish you did, but where do we go from here?
Ashcroft, so clean at ground level. Bailey tries to get around Bontempelli. He says, "Not in my house, not tonight."
Well, let's get onto the votes. Have you got some votes for us this week?
Sure.
I think the three was fairly obvious in Marcus Bontempelli. They moved Bez to him in the second half, but I think it was too little too late by then. He quelled his influence a little bit, but Bont was still far and away the best on ground. I've given Jamara 2. You kick 5 goals, you get 2 votes. And Harris gets my 1.
Yeah, I had the same 3 players, and let's just pretend I did them in that order.
You had Jamara and Harris swapped?
I actually had Bont with 1.
Really?
And Jamara with 3 and Harris with 2.
Okay.
Because they don't win the game without Jamara, so...
True. All right, well, there we go. There's the votes there. What are changes you make? You've flagged that you've been a bit ruthless this week with changes to the 22.
Let's say prior to, and there's not a pun intended there, prior to actually reading or looking at any of the things by Hodgie or Montagna, I went for role players because I identified. So I've gone, and this is probably pretty brutal and a little bit, let's say, unpopular, but I've gone out Joyce, Wilmot, Danaher, Bailey.
Interesting, because I was thinking about it as we were having a chat, that the role players that I probably could identify, and Wilmot probably sits in as one of those, with Starcevic are the 2 that stood out probably most to me. So go on.
And in for Joyce, I think given Collingwood, they've kind of only got 2.5 tools, so we can probably deal with not having Joyce this week. So I've gone Ainsworth in, I've gone Pryor in for Wilmot, I've gone Dev Robertson in for Bailey, and Kyle Lohman in for Danaher, just to provide a little bit more spice. And as I alluded to earlier, is there a necessity for 3, 4 talls? I don't think so. You know, Richmond in 2019 won with 1 moron tall in Jack Rewalt. So why do we need 4 marking targets if, few of them are marking?
Yeah, I was going to say, especially when none of them are marking. Well,
and I've put Cal Archie on the bench.
And he's the quintessential role player in the fact that it's like, you want me down forward, I'll go down forward. You want me a half back, I'll play there. You want me on the wing, sure, whatever. You need me off the bench and just, when someone gets injured and play that role, I'll do that too. That's been Cal Archie's career at Brisbane so far. So he is the quintessential role player, as I said. I've only got the 2 changes. Joyce goes out, so does McCarthy, and Lohman and Ainsworth are in.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it might, I know Wilmot's a popular fella, but it's sort of, a point was made to me. We've got a few new players in the starting 22, and they're just sort of there, and there's sort of an element of security around it. Ashcroft is in, and he sort of will be in, and Wilmot's been in, and he'll stay in, and it's sort of like there's an element of, there's other players that have kind of been there, and you kind of got to create an element of like, well, you got to perform.
Yeah, it's so funny because it was like last week or the week before you said Wilmot was a lock for your 22.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean. It just shows how flippant that I am. I notice you got a big cheeky grin on your face.
It shows how flippant the Lions are too.
Well, it's hard because you're looking at going like, well, where can you fit? You're almost looking at getting Pryor and Dev, and possibly I could put Archie in the 22 and have Dev on the as the Medi sub or tax sub or whatever they're called now. But you sort of I did mind looking at the players coming in and where they can fit in the team.
Yeah,
and I think that's possibly a big issue with the team is they're looking at trying to get players in and sorting them out into a team rather than looking at the positions of the players and, swapping positionally players out, despite the fact that, Wilmot's probably played better than Link McCarthy, but you can't necessarily take out a small forward and bring in a half-backman, because if you bring Ainsworth in, you're sitting there looking at going, well, you've got Ainsworth, Rayner, Wilmot, McKenna, Coleman that all sort of play on that half back line, and that's too many players. So that's the reason why, it's more so an impact element and trying to actually just put the right players in the right positions rather than moving the magnets, put the magnets of the position of the guy that he's best at it.
Lions fans already agitated. That will only add to it. Dogs out by 14.
Let me ask you this. If available, Dan Rich or Darcy Gardner, do they come straight back in for you?
No. I think Daniel Rich would have been really useful in that Bulldogs game. However, I think that Daniel Rich tends to have his most impact when the team aren't playing as well. So it almost gives a false necessity to his impact.
I just think in a game where we're lacking class finishing, those are 2 things that Daniel Rich has in spades. I mean, he obviously lacks in other areas of the game, but, obviously his decision-making, his kicking and his class don't falter too often.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably unpopularly say that his decision making kind of becomes redundant when you have his decision is to kick, and it's to kick long, which mitigates what would be, let's say, a poor decision, because he can just roost the ball. I actually had him as the tack sub, and I think that he could be a really good option as the tack sub. I had it rubbed out for Archie because my brain's been all over the place, man. Like, this is what this team does. But I think having Rich as a tactical sub could be a really interesting thing, because you go, well, how's the game going? And do you pull the trigger early? And do you say, well, we need a bit of kick from, because I'd be treating him the same way they're treating Dane Zorko, in terms of he probably won't play every game, and that's become clear because he hasn't. But I'm not a Daniel Rich disliker or anything. He's dropped a lot of weight, and I think he's probably trying to cover the ground a lot better this year. But like, he's old, he's an older player, and
especially when we've got, it's very obvious that we've got a lack of depth in key position players, both front and back. One area of the ground we don't have a lack of depth is that half-back role, that half-back wing ball use role. As you said, you listed them off before. We've got, a plethora, but it's the key positions now where we find ourselves with Adams going down, with McStay leaving, with what we've got running around in the twos, which is, as I said before, Fullerton, Kalen Lane, Henry Smith, and that's it. Yeah,
well, I mean, Fullerton cops a lot of heat, but, as far as a role player who's a tall...
He give it a crack.
I know, but people hate the guy for some reason. Like, he's so nice. And, he played in that Melbourne game. And, yeah, like, he didn't kick a bag of goals, but he created contests and he was there and he ran and he was willing. Like, it's almost like he does everything that Danaher doesn't. Yeah, he's probably not going to be a dominator that's going to kick 6 goals in a game ever. But he at least kind of gives you that kind of integrity. Maybe that's something to look at. But at the same time, I'm looking at going less tall.
Well, I mean, if we look ahead to this Collingwood game, the big news out of the Collingwood camp is they've got no ruckman. So Darcy Cameron is out for what looks to be an extended period of time on the sidelines. Mason Cox is out. So you're looking at McStay doing a bulk of the ruck work, unless they've got someone else floating around on their list that can come in and pinch hit.
Probably bring Josh Fraser in or something.
Back out of Darren Jolly back out of retirement again.
Well, I think, funnily enough, the last time I saw Josh Fraser, he was coaching the local, who was it? The Bull Ants, North Preston Bull Ants.
Yeah, right.
I want to say. I went to a game and I was sitting there going, man, I know that guy. I don't know where. And then
that's Gold Coast Suns legend Josh Fraser.
I just thought about him being really sad after a couple of grand finals, so it made me happy.
Well, if we do look ahead to this Easter Thursday clash against the Collingwood Magpies at the Gabba, I sort of touched on it before. I've got a weird but good feeling about this one, and I think a lot of that is Gabba factor. The fact I'm going to be there, Easter Thursday traditional clash. It's going to be a sellout. It's going to be a big game for the club. Generally, we respond. We don't often lose 2 in a row, and I think that game against the Dogs, especially that first quarter, that hot start, I think that's going to be a nice dress rehearsal for how this game against the Pies is going to be with the way they're playing their footy at the moment. It's going to be very similar, except they're going to punish you more than the Dogs will. So we can't afford to be turning the ball over. We can't afford to be giving away shitty free kicks.
We're going to have to run, that's for sure.
Yep. Do we put someone on Dacos?
I don't know. Like, I mean, that's kind of one of the things you look at and you go, well, Ainsworth can go with that, I reckon. He's got the run. He's got a little bit of footy smarts to him. I think he's... but I don't know. Like, doesn't matter. It shouldn't if you can starve them of the ball.
True. There's been 2 schools of thought with the Nick Dacos thing, and I've never heard a second-year player sort of be talked about as such a game-changing maniac before. The schools of thought is you do put someone to nullify his use with the ball, a la an Ainsworth, or you put a dynamic forward like a Charlie Cameron on him, that if he gets, points on the board early, then it suddenly puts Nick Dacos on the back foot of like, okay, well, I've actually got to be a defender here, not some sort of half-back that can just chase the ball.
I think that was kind of a train of thought, because I think it was it Brownie that wanted to put Shea Bolton on him?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of live or die by the sword stuff.
It is.
I think that put someone on him who's going to really rough him up. It's a sort of thing where I'd look at it and go, oh, man, imagine like Mitch Robbo playing on him or something like that. Like, see how he stands up when he's under physical heat, because I'll admit, the the start of this season's made me a little bit less chuffed to just watch footy. It's a general sense. It's hard when you're frustrated and you can see so many other teams doing things a lot better than your team. But yeah, put some physical pressure, physical heat on him. Yeah, it'd be interesting.
I don't mind Ainsworth for that role as well. So who knows? We'll find out Wednesday night where the magnets drop.
Do you remember this game 5 years ago?
5 years ago, what was that?
2018. It's the first game you and I went to together up at the Gabba.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I do remember that.
It's me getting sentimental. There we go.
It's gonna be a really tough game, but it's the sort of game that if we can walk away with a win, I'll spend the next week going, oh yeah, maybe we're all right, and then we'll come up against North, and then we'll get done, and then it's just gonna be the roller coaster for a while. But I mean,
that's kind of the thing, because you look at it and you look at the 2001 season, and you know, I keep harping back to that, and the team looked like a shell of a team up until about round 6 or 7.
Look at the Cats right now; they're 0-3.
Yeah.
And I'm not giving up on Geelong. I've made that mistake over the last 15 years. I'm not going to do it now.
They're just waiting for their cybernetics to come in. I've seen Hawkins' eyes; they're glassy.
Well, thoughts for the game? I mean, I know you haven't got predictions, but what do you want to see? I guess, if anything, what do you want to see from the game?
I'd just like to see the ability to make better decisions despite the perceived pressure or the pressure. You know, you haven't struggled with this. You know, bring back an element of, you know, I know Collingwood are playing, let's say, entertaining football at the moment, but wasn't that one of Fagan's big things back when the team were middling? He said, we're in the entertainment business.
Yep.
Bring back a bit of that entertainment, because a lot of the stuff they're doing at the moment is not entertaining. It's like pulling your hair out, pulling your teeth out, sitting on a thumbtack shit. Let's have some entertainment back, so that we can feel good watching the footy.
That's when the team defense falls down, and then the same conversations where they've got no team defense, but scoring's not a problem, but they can't defend.
I think, the defense are doing it on their own at the moment anyway, so...
It remains to be seen. The team's coming out Wednesday night. The game's obviously Thursday night. It is a must-win game to an extent. I mean, I would say, and the bookies would say, and most punters would say, we're probably not going to walk away with the win from this one, just based on form, but I've got a sneaky good feeling about it for whatever reasons, and so I'm just going to hold on to that if I can.
Just to rub salt in the wound, Sandy Roberts the whole night called me Big Jeff Brown. Jeff, did he? Oh no!
I do have a player for you from the last 20 years, an obscure player that has walked through the doors at the Brisbane Lions, and that is the number 12, James Hawksley.
James Hawksley.
Yes.
The man that looked like a hobbit.
Yes, the man that looked like a hobbit. The bearded fellow, listed in 2008, delisted in 2012 after 32 games and 6 goals.
Did he move to Carlton, or am I tripping?
No, I think he maybe sort of started training with another team or got listed but never played any other senior games anywhere else. And then I think he ended up playing at Aspley for a while, even captaining or coaching them.
He's an odd... Yeah, they're all odd fellas, aren't they?
I mean, that whole team was just full of odd fellas. Jason Rowe, Ryan Harwood, Jono Freeman, Bryce Retzlaff, anyone that just sort of walked through... Eamon Buchanan. That time where we made a final, so we thought, all right, well, let's just get any player that's past their prime. We'll get Fev, Andrew Rains, Eamon Buchanan, Xavier Clark, Matt Maguire. That'll do it. That'll do it.
Well, I remember when Jason Rowe was supposed to be the next Mal Michael.
And I think a lot of people thought that, and maybe that was just like, hey, these guys look similar.
Just a bit of just vague
resemblance.
Late 2000s, early 2010s racism going in there. Like,
he was not half. And then we had players like Scott Harding, Albert Proud, just people I'm just wasting my obscure playlist at the moment, but people that just...
Yeah, I'm like, you're shooting like an AK-47 here. What are you doing? Like, calm it, man.
Save some of them for the podcast to come.
Well, that's a preview.
Well, that puts an end to a very frustrating week of footy. Hopefully, that can all be remedied on Thursday night. But have you got any more final thoughts before we wrap this one up to share? I mean, about the team, about the game, about things moving forward. I mean, the first four was always going to be tough. We said that week one that the first 4 games were always going to be tough. We even said at some point that 0-1-4 was looking more likely than less likely. So we've at least crossed that off the list. If we can play anything like the way we did against Melbourne, who looked like they returned to form very well against Sydney yesterday. Will win the game of footy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is that after this 4, you're looking at going to Adelaide Hills to play, a rejuvenated North Melbourne, and then whatever they are, Giants at Giant Stadium. So it's kind of, there's...
If we drop either of those 2 games, then I think it's time to hit the panic button a little bit.
As far as a kind of largest scope, not much to say, but just, get it done.
I think that should be the pre-game address from Harris and Lockie. Just get it done.
But I do want to leave you on one thing. You little beauty!